Today I'm going to tell you about Kiko Orca, which was the lead in the film Free Willy. In the movie, Willy is desperately eager for freedom and yet returns to the ocean despite all obstacles. Kiko's fate was no less bright and tragic. In the life of the legendary orca, there were captivity and years of endless training and unexpected freedom. Except the reality is quite different from the movie, and the story ended completely unpredictable. The orca is the most dangerous marine predator. Even white sharks are afraid of them. And they're right, because orcas grow up to 10 meters in length and weigh about 8 tons. This is a whole ton heavier than the empty Kamaz 5320. Orca eats up to 150 kilograms of meat per day, and it doesn't care who to hunt for: mackerel, seals, or whales. A flock of these black and white dolphins can cope with almost any prey. They are powerful, strong, and freedom-loving animals, not adapted to life in captivity at all. Still, orcas are caught and trained to perform tricks for the amusement of the audience. Such an unenviable fate befell Kiko the dolphin. In 1976, he got caught in fishing nets and lost his family. Then Kiko was only 2 years old. Orcas live from 70 to 100 years, as much as people do. A 2-year-old dolphin is very similar to a 2-year-old baby. He's just as helpless, naive, and loves his mother as a child. I wonder who came up with the name Kiko for the little orca. In Japanese, this word means lucky. In my opinion, to call such an unhappy dolphin is a very cruel joke. Kiko was born off the coast of Iceland in the cold northern waters. At first he lived in the aquarium at Hamnarfjordur. There he was taught to trust people and perform the simplest tricks. 3 years later, Kiko was sold to Ontario. In the Canadian Zoo, the dolphin lived until 1985 and then went to Mexico City's amusement park. Kiko wasn't lucky. The Mexican dolphinarium was cramped and completely unsuitable for keeping orcas. In addition, the pool was not on the street but indoors. Such conditions are unbearable for orcas. The fact is that these marine mammals do not rely on vision. They are oriented in space using echolocation. But indoors, it is impossible to use echolocation. Sounds are reflected from the obstruction, and the dolphin does not feel the space around, only the walls. Kiko felt the same disorientation as a man locked in a cramped room with mirrored walls. Another problem was loneliness. Orcas live in large families of 18 to 20 members. They hunt together, take care of each other, even talk. I'm not exaggerating. Orcas have their own primitive language, but instead of words, they use whistling, twittering, and clicking. Even an adult orca, left alone, experiences extreme stress, and little Kiko was only 8 years old. But the dolphin was strong and smart. He was able to adapt to new conditions of life. Kiko became friends with the people, learned to execute many commands, and mastered the difficult tricks. He jumped into the ring, caught balls, somersaulted on command, and obeyed the coaches at a glance. The Mexican aquarium was poorly funded, so they didn't spend money on the delivery of normal seawater. They used fresh salted water. There were no air conditioners, and the temperature in the rooms rose to 25 to 30 degrees. In such terrible conditions, Kiko began to get sick. Inflammation and ulcers appeared on the dolphin's skin. He was weakening and suffocating, could not be underwater for long. A healthy orca holds its breath for a quarter of an hour, while Kiko dives for no more than 5 minutes. Dolphinarium workers couldn't do anything because there was no money to treat the animal. But Kiko was lucky. In 1991, Hollywood producers drew attention to him. They were just looking for an orca for the role of Willy, talented, good-natured, and patient. It was a key factor because orcas are very vicious. There are cases when they seriously injured and even killed trainers. The producers could not risk the health of the crew. But Kiko, who grew up in captivity, considered people his family. He was never aggressive. Producers gave him the role of Willy, and it paid off. The 15-year-old dolphin made friends with the film crew, went through a complicated training program, and started shooting in the film. He worked for several hours every day, despite a serious illness. Makeup artists, by the way, couldn't hide it. Do you remember this shot? It has become the visit card of the film. Even on it, the dorsal fin of Kiko is omitted, and this is a sure sign of illness. Healthy orcas have a resilient fin that is directed upwards. In addition, attentive viewers noticed that strange dark spots were visible on Willy's skin. These are the ulcers that Mexican veterinarians could not cure. Filming continued for 2 years, and when the movie was released, Kiko became a star. The audience fell in love with the story of a freedom-loving orca. They were sincerely interested in the fate of the waterborne actor. When people found out that Kiko was languishing in captivity just like Willie, a wave of indignation arose. People began to raise money to cure the orca and set it free. In 1995, they even established a Kiko Relief Fund. But it's only in the cinema that everything is simple, it never happens in life. It turned out that Kiko was absolutely not ready for a free life. He did not know how to hunt. Moreover, he did not understand that live fish is food. Throughout his life, the dolphin received fish and pieces of meat from the refrigerator, so when he first met live mackerel, he wanted to play with it. Kiko never saw the sea, so he was afraid of open space and depth. He did not know how to dive. Kiko also did not know the dolphin language, which means he could not make contact with other orcas. Sounds weird, but these are the facts. Each group of orcas has its own dialect, cubs learn it from birth, and representatives of different flocks hardly understand each other. Kiko has long forgotten everything that his family taught him. Scientists and trainers knew Kiko will not live even a day in the wild, but the public demanded that the waterborne actor be released into the ocean, and preparations for the release of the orca began. Kiko was transported from Mexico to the southwestern United States to Oregon. In Newport, a huge training pool, repeating the relief of the seabed, was built for him. Scientists poured sand there and placed huge boulders, planted algae, and launched fish. And of course, they filled the pool with real seawater so that the orca would get used to normal living conditions. Trainers taught Kiko to dive and get food, introduced him to other dolphins to restore socialization. Scientists did not believe in the success of this venture, but Kiko again committed the incredible thing. From an aquarium fish, he became a real predator orca. Only one thing remained unchanged. Kiko still loved people very much and did not trust dolphins. In 1998, they finally decided to release the orca not off the US coast, but in Iceland, his homeland. But how could it be done? Traveling by ship will take too much time, and the helicopter will not be able to cover the distance between America and Europe. Scientists decided that Kiko would fly by plane. For this, the orca had to be pulled out of the water for 18 hours, and this is a monstrous load even for a healthy animal. To help Kiko, the aquarium staff lubricated his body with a gel that prevents drying out of his skin. The orca was placed in a huge container, and ice was constantly poured into it so that Kiko would not receive a heat stroke. To protect the orca from the heat of the day, the plane flew up into the sky late at night, and yet thousands of fans came to conduct their pet. Adults and children were holding the banners, "Have a nice trip," "Forgive us, Kiko, come home." Kiko spent almost 24 hours in a cramped container, suffering from heat and choking. And when the plane arrived in Iceland, it turned out that local laws prohibit releasing an orca into the ocean. And, by the way, they prohibit it for good reason. In Iceland, animals that have lived in captivity for a long time cannot be released into the ocean. They can be carriers of dangerous diseases. And Kiko was really sick, quite seriously. But the freedom fighters insisted again. Kiko was tested, treated for all diseased, and yet released into the wild. Do you think this is a happy ending? Not at all. The story goes on. 22-year-old Kiko did not want to swim in the open sea. He was simply scared. The orca settled in a fenced bay, closer to the shore, and lived there for a long 4 years. Kiko did not want to hunt, and he was constantly fed with fish, and tourists came to the bay in droves in order to admire the orca. Kiko was very glad to have the company. He willingly talked with people, swam with them, and even allowed them to climb onto his back. The orca ventured for a long independent swimming only in 2002. On the way, Kiko learned to get food for himself and even met with several flocks of wild orcas. Kiko showed interest in individuals of his species and tried to make friends, but the poor dolphin was driven out each time. It was another problem that freedom fighters did not take into account. The fact is that orcas live in close family groups. Strangers are not accepted there. Unable to stand alone, Kiko returned to the people. He again settled off the coast, not in Iceland, but in Norway. Unfortunately, the local climate was too harsh for the orca, who had lived in hot Mexico for many years. Kiko caught a cold, contracted pneumonia, and died, despite the efforts of the veterinarians. He was only 27 years old. For an orca, this is still youth. Kiko fans were in mourning. On the seashore, they held a farewell ceremony and later built a monument. The action to free Kiko was one of the most ambitious and expensive in the history of animal welfare. Fans of the legendary orca spent as much as $20 million, but did it make sense? I think it would be better to build a large, comfortable pond for Kiko in the temperature, climate zone somewhere in New Jersey or Oregon. The orca would live there for many years in warmth and care next to his loved people. Do you agree? Write your opinion in the comments.